Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. Before we begin, I want to acknowledge that we are gathered here on Treaty 6 territory. Today, Minister Chandro received our comprehensive plan to improve public safety in our downtown and across our public transit. Your City Council and our administration has been working hard with Chinatown community, downtown stakeholders, law enforcement since we were elected. I believe that by building collaborative relationships, we can effectively address the safety concerns of our communities. We have responded to these concerns immediately and understand that urgent action is needed. That is why on May 24th, 2022, we dedicated $300,000 to address Chinatown safety, and in February, we immediately addressed transit safety concerns with the creation of the community transit outreach teams, as well as deploying and hiring more peace officers to hotspots. On Tuesday, your City Council voted to maintain Edmonton Police Service budget-based funding at $407 million and create a new funding formula to ensure that EPS keeps our community safe. Council also committed to covering a large gap that will be created by the provincial decision to increase its share of photo radar revenue. This funding shortfall would be needed to be covered by the increased property taxes. All of these efforts are in response to what we have heard from community members and what we have already been in motion since the beginning of the term. Finding a multi-layered, integrated, and compassionate approach to community safety has always been our priority. In my recent meeting with Minister Chandro, Minister Luan, and Minister Ellis, we talked about our shared responsibility of keeping our communities safe. So today, along with presenting our comprehensive plan, we have asked the provincial government to work with us to tackle ongoing societal issues of houselessness, mental health, and drug poisoning crises that are at the root causes of crime and disorder in our community. Now I want to give you a high-level overview of our plan before I ask our city manager, Andre Corbould, to provide you with more details. The plan includes actions to increase daily cleaning of streets, back alleys, high traffic areas, encampments, needle cleanup, and improve community vibrancy. The plan includes developing a healthy streets operations center located in Chinatown to increase police officer and peace officer presence coordinated by city staff and social service agencies. The plan includes enhanced transit safety by hiring more transit peace officers, working along social workers, as well as amending the passenger conduct bylaw to improve safety of transit users. I value transparency and accountability. That is why we have decided to release this plan in full on the City of Edmonton website and include a full listing of the referenced strategies, bylaws, and supporting documents totaling over 250 pages. I encourage you to read through the plan to understand the actions we are taking now in the future and what we are asking of other governments. I believe our council and administration, in collaboration with community leaders and business, will do what it is in our control to improve safety and well-being, but we cannot do this alone. That is why collaboration with provincial government is so critical. I'm going to ask Andre to walk you through the plan now. Then I will be back to share some specific requests we are making to the provincial government to make our communities safer and vibrant. So Andre.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mayor Sohi. So I'm pleased to provide additional details about the city's plan to increase safety in the downtown core and on the transit system. 12 recent actions, 4 upcoming actions, and a continuing commitment to collaborate. First, the City of Edmonton Police Service has identified the need for a Healthy Streets Operations Center in Chinatown, a place where Edmonton Police Service, city staff, and others can be deployed to do their work together in a joint manner. Multidisciplinary teams working together close to where they are needed, right in Chinatown. And we are looking for this location specifically now and in collaboration with EPS, and we will be moving in shortly. Second, an increased police presence. The Chinatown community was clear about what was needed, and that has been provided for the past couple of weeks and will continue to be sustained. Third, increased peace officer presence in the downtown core and on transit. Again, the community was clear about the need for this increased presence, and that has been started. Fourth, we're making transit spaces safer by prohibiting inappropriate behaviors and open drug use. The transit system is just not a safe place to do drugs or interfere with other people who are trying to use the transit to get to their places of work. A bylaw change passed yesterday gives the city the authority to promote the safety and welfare of everyone using transit. Fifth, a stronger response to encampments and problem properties. We are assigning more resources to help people find housing and clean up what's left behind when we remove encampments and ensure that derelict properties don't attract fires or disorder to the neighborhood. Sixth, business security. We previously confirmed, as the mayor indicated, $300,000 in funding that would be provided to Chinatown and the Area Business Association to support private security. And this private security will work as part of the joint team with EPS and bylaw officers. And that funding has been provided, and I understand the contracts are signed for that security to continue. Seventh, we'll be allocating $1 million to community recovery, and the funding will be allocated by a committee including the Chinatown and Area Business Association. They know best in their community, and we will rely on their expertise to figure out how to best spend those dollars. This is a similar model that was used for the Downtown Recovery Fund, and the work to set up that committee is under development this week and next week. Eighth, to keep the community clean, we are installing more public washrooms in Chinatown and downtown as an extension of our mobile washroom program, and we're working with the community to find the best locations, and these washrooms will be safe and attended so that they're routinely cleaned and monitored and people have safe locations. Ninth, we're working with the community on a safety audit, a new safety audit to identify places and things which put people at risk. 10th, a cleaner community feels like a safer community, and we're working on that as well. We used to clean alleys and roadways weekly. We recently, in past few months, moved to a daily cleaning, and now we're moving it up to several times a day in those areas that require it. And we've got a specific city-run needle program to remove needles and clearing hazardous things that some people have left behind. 11th, in the downtown pedway system and on nearby streets, we're supporting a program for medical professionals and outreach workers to prevent drug poisonings. 12th, we're talking to businesses. We used to be in a position where we would send letters to business about the need for them to clean up the private property in front of their property. We're changing that dynamic. We're helping them clean their private properties, and now our staff in the community will talk to businesses, and instead of giving them warnings, we'll provide them information and supports that are available from the city to help clean up their private property around encampment areas. These 12 actions are practical steps that make a difference right at the street level. They respond to the concerns we've heard from Chinatown and downtown communities and from transit passengers. Looking ahead, the city will be working with the Chinatown and downtown community and others. Next week, the Council Executive Committee will be discussing infrastructure improvements in Chinatown. A number of projects such as street and park improvements in Chinatown and downtown, the Harbin Gate, and safety measures are in the queue and will be reviewed by that committee. We will also start conversations about decentralization. People need social services across the entire region in the city, and the downtown core is doing more than its fair share. And so there might be ways to encourage services in other communities, both regionally and across the city, so that people don't always have to travel downtown to get those services. And we know some of that exists already, but we're going to look at ways of enhancing that. And we will continue to collaborate with all levels of government as we move forward, and we also appreciate Edmontonians pitching in. Some of the upcoming collaboration involves marketing and promotion campaigns to encourage people to come downtown and eat in Chinatown. And we don't need to wait for those ads. I would say please come down where you can. As Edmontonians, we're all saddened by what's happening in the city, and as Edmontonians, we can do something about it. We are consumers, and there are stores, restaurants, and services throughout the city and in downtown that would love to meet all of you. So we believe we have a comprehensive plan to keep Edmontonians safe downtown and on transit. And with that, I'll hand back to your worship, Mayor Sohi.
Thank you, Andre. Now that you have heard about the details of the safety plan, I want to talk about a few areas that I'm requesting our provincial government to assist, because community safety and well-being is a shared responsibility. We have 5 specific requests for the provincial government to consider. The funding that we receive from the province for EPS has not kept pace with inflation and population growth. Prior to 2021, there were 2 provincial grants that provided EPS funding. Municipal police assistant grants of $16 per capita meant that police funding grew with population, but was not adjusted for inflation since 2004. In 2008, province funded 105 police officers for our city, but capped the per capita cost to $100,000 per officer. Again, that funding has not been adjusted for inflation, and in 2022, the cost per officer has nearly doubled. This has meant that City of Edmonton has had to fill that gap by increasing police funding through property taxes. Our first request is that province increases contribution to Edmonton Police Service to match their funding with inflation and population growth. Our second request is that we want the province to step up to improve emergency shelter conditions. We know that poor and exclusionary shelter standards have contributed to the number of encampments in Edmonton, and limited operating hours have led to social disorder. In order to address this issue, we're asking the Government of Alberta to provide additional funding to shelter providers to implement city's minimum emergency shelter standards. Our third request is to increase the availability of shelter spaces and transitional housing. Currently, there are approximately 634 permanently funded emergency shelter spaces in Edmonton, compared to 1,758 spaces in Calgary. I don't understand the reason for this discrepancy when both cities are facing similar challenges. We're asking Government of Alberta to immediately close this discrepancy and provide Edmonton the same level of support they provide to Calgary. Our fourth request is to fund wrapped-around services for supportive and permanent housing. Here again, I would like to share some numbers with you. Our preliminary research has shown that Calgary receives 40 to 50% more in funding to support community efforts to end houselessness compared to Edmonton. We all know that supportive housing is a proven way of ending chronic episodic houselessness. In 2022, Edmonton will be adding 436 supportive housing units. We are requesting that Government of Alberta increase Homeward Trust's funding by $8.9 million on an ongoing basis starting in 2022, and continue to increase their funding to give us the same support they provide to Calgary. Our fifth request is for province to deal with the ongoing drug poisoning crisis. Edmonton is currently in the midst of a drug poisoning crisis with a record number of recorded drug poisoning deaths in 2020 and 2021. There is a critical need for additional spaces and investment to meet the increased need in our city. Provincial investments are critical to increase these health services to Edmontonians, and we request that province work with us and community organizations to determine priority areas to increase harm reduction services. I am confident that with the implementation of our plan, and if the province steps up funds these very reasonable requests, we will be able to improve safety and well-being in our city. With that, we are happy to take your questions.
Go ahead. Thank you, Mayor Sohi and City Manager. If I can just ask the media to line up behind the microphone at the back. We'll go through the questions one by one. We'll do one round of questions first, and then if you have any subsequent follow-up questions, we're happy to take those at the end. So if I can just ask, if you have a question, just stand in the queue and we'll get to the first person. And maybe I'll have the mayor and the city manager just come to the front and you can address the question to whomever.
Perfect. Yeah, it's Shaylan Skalski with CTV News Edmonton. My question is for the mayor. Mayor, we are getting some reaction from the province to this plan. When I asked the premier about it this morning, he said things like, "I'm glad to hear the city of Edmonton has begun to listen, and we hope that the city will take this as seriously as Edmontonians want them to." In a statement, the Justice Minister called it a positive step, but said there is still a considerable amount of work to do. I want to get your response to those comments, and also how confident you are that the province is going to respond favorably to your requests, given that relationship.
No, we have worked really hard with community over the last 2 weeks, but we have been working with community ever since we got elected to understand our safety needs. And I was very pleased with the meeting that we had with Minister Chandro and Mr. Luan and Mr. Ellis. And I hope that they will review our plan in a comprehensive way, as well as the work that we have been doing, and also recognize that public safety is a shared responsibility, that they will be willing to work with us to work in areas where that are their area of responsibility to help fund end houselessness, mental health, addictions crisis that we are facing. So we look forward to the conversation that we would have with them, but I am confident that we have put together a very comprehensive plan that will allow us to make our communities safe and continue to build on this success in the future.
And as a follow-up, a little bit unrelated to today's announcement, we're hearing reports out of Vancouver that Edmonton did not make the final cut for the FIFA bid. Have you or your office received that information or any indication as to why we've been taken out of the running?
I have not heard that, and once I know, we'll get back to you.
Hi, Brianna Carson-Smith with Global Edmonton. I wanted to start with the idea to change the vacant detainee unit in the police headquarters to an opioid transition unit. The optics could be sketchy because you're taking what's essentially a holding cell for prisoners and switching it to use for opioid treatment. Can you explain maybe the rationale behind that?
Yeah, so I'm not sure what you're talking about. What we were talking about was there was a real request for a police and joint presence within Chinatown. So what we're talking about is opening up a straight
No, sorry, not that one. The one in the police headquarters in the basement. It's a $1.4 million ask to the province to transition the vacant detainee unit into an opioid transit. It's on page 25 of the report.
Yeah, and that's something that EPS has been working with Justice and Health on, and that is essentially a place to help people get supports. But that is something the EPS has been working directly with Health on. Yeah.
Do you have any concerns about the optics of it, though? Like putting people in EPS headquarters?
Well, I think it needs to be considered and figured out what the best approach is. And again, I think there's more discussions to be had on that. Yeah.
Have either of you spoken with Minister Chandro today about the report?
No, we haven't. We were actually trying to arrange a meeting where I can personally go to deliver our safety plan, but our schedules did not work out. But we will be reaching out to them very quickly so we can walk them through the plan. Another thing I have requested is that our safety plan be reviewed by independent, impartial panel of experts to make sure that we are identifying the gaps and also having an impartial analysis done on it. And we will be willing to work with the province and the independent safety experts panel to understand what more we need to be done and also validate the work we're doing.
Specifically on the Homeward Trust funding, you've been asking for that for quite some time. It wasn't in the most recent budget, which is when theoretically it should have been, if they were going to give it to you. So what's your confidence level in terms of whether they're going to give you that $8 million and then even more?
You know, I would say that if our provincial government is really serious about the safety and well-being of Edmontonians, and they've asked us to step up, we have stepped up, and I hope they will step up as well, because a lot of the areas, the root causes of crime are houselessness, mental health, addictions crisis, and those are provincial area of responsibility, right? So I hope that province will recognize that they have certain responsibilities to Edmontonians, and that they need to fulfill those responsibilities by investing more in Edmonton or invest equitably in Edmonton. I have highlighted 2 areas where we are not getting even half the support that Calgary is getting for shelter space, and we are getting half of the support for ending houselessness in our city compared to Calgary, when our issues are pretty much the same. If not, I would say our issues are more complex than Calgary's issues, right? So, we'll see. Words matter, but I would say actions should speak louder than words, right? So, yeah.
Thank you. Darcy Ropchan, City News. On cracking down on drug use on transit, why did it take so long to get to this point? And more specifically, what will that look like? I know just talking to the transit union, their sticking point is that their peace officers aren't legally or physically equipped really to deal with that problem.
I want everyone to understand that we will continue to have a very compassionate approach when it comes to dealing with the houseless population who is in transit centers because they have no other place to go and they're not causing any disturbance. The purpose of clarity is that we want to make sure that people are not causing disturbance for the transit users, as well as the criminal element that is preying on vulnerable people. That is what we want to target. That's why having these 2 amendments to the bylaw will allow more clarity for our officers to tackle that with that criminal element. Also, there shouldn't be any tolerance for open drug use anywhere in private confined areas like LRT stations or transit facilities or on trains or libraries or rec centers, anywhere, right? So this is something that we take very seriously, and I hope that this additional clarity will provide our bylaw officers, and also clear expectations from the community and the user of the system that these are unacceptable behaviors on our transit system.
And just on Chinatown security upgrades, talking to business owners there, a lot of them say they've been asking for a lot of this stuff for decades. So how much of this has been in the works for years versus how much of this is a response to recent events in the area?
The plight and the hardship that people in Chinatown and businesses in Chinatown have faced goes back to decades, right? It's a neglect that community has faced. I reached out to community leaders right after I got elected to figure out a way, because that's a commitment that a number of us made during the campaign to improve safety and well-being in Chinatown. So we've been working on it. This is nothing new. Yes, over the last 2 weeks, we have accelerated our plan, listening to community and working with community after the tragic death of 2 of our members in Chinatown, right? So this is the work that we have been doing, and we will continue to build on that work.
Hello, for Andrew Corbould. I just wanted some more information on the operations center in Chinatown. So the plan just has, I think, 2 sentences on it. So can you just talk about, like, where does this come from? Is this related to past motions from council and, like, you're moving all these people together into one spot? Is this something you came up with in your authority as the city manager? And how does it work? When's it going to open? Just more details than there is. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. It comes from a couple of places, but I would say that the concept is based on help teams and COT teams, which essentially pair law enforcement with social agencies to make those connections for folks. And then taking a more integrated approach between the city resources and EPS resources and social agency resources. Now, we do that certainly to a degree, but we haven't yet done it in one facility together in a place in Chinatown specifically. So that's part of the reasoning. It's sort of reinforcing some success we've had with those joint teams working together, and it involves police, fire, EMS, bylaw officers, and the social agencies. So that's proved very effective on transit system. It's proved very effective with help teams. To establish a center like that can run operations in the middle of Chinatown, it reinforces that success. However, the other thing we heard is Chinatown, was looking for some constant police presence and physical presence in the middle of Chinatown. So that meets both aims quite well. Yeah, and I would say the plan was joint developed with all of us at the table, talking about what the needs were and how we could best react.
Sir, and when will that open?
Very shortly. We are citing specific locations right now, and we anticipate within weeks we'll be able to open, subject to leasing and all those kinds of things. Having said that, in the absence of that site opening, we're actually deploying in that manner as we speak right now.
Thank you. A question for Mayor Sohi. I want to ask about how the pressure from the province changed or influenced your recent votes on council. So how has this request for a safety plan changed your intentions? For instance, with the police budget, you told me that if the 22 million isn't going to police, then that's on the province and they need to fill that gap. But then council, you supported a vote to increase that amount for the tax base. So to me, when I see that, I think that must be because of this safety plan. So how has the province pressure changed your votes, including perhaps the vote yesterday about transit safety?
Well, first of all, I think it's very important to understand that the intent of the initial motion by Councillor Rutherford was never to reduce police budget. It was to give them certainty on their base budget. I know there was some confusion whether the base budget be $407 million or $385 million. We corrected that misinformation or misunderstanding yesterday. As far as the discussion to fill the gap from the shortfall in the photo radar revenue, this is clear indication that when province walks away from their area of responsibility, we have to pick up the pieces. And that's exactly what we are forced to do in this case, right? We have no choice other than fund the police at an appropriate level. And that's a conversation that I would like to have with the province on about their role. I identified 2 areas where they have not done enough or have not fulfilled their responsibility, and photo radar revenue is the 3rd one that we would like to talk about. Yes, it would require a tax levy increase, but that also speaks to our commitment. It speaks to our commitment not to be afraid to, make decisions that will allow us to properly fund our service. We heard that from community, we heard that from EPS, we heard that from business leaders. And I am very proud that we provide our police service adequate amount of resources. I would say compared to other cities, our police is very well funded. And we are proud of that. And I am glad that we are doing that. I also want to make it very clear that as we were preparing our safety plan to present to Minister Chandro, we inquired with other municipalities if they have their own safety plans in place. And I can tell you the plan we have put together is comprehensive plan than compared to any other city. Calgary, Red Deer, Lethbridge, Grand Prairie, Peace River, Medicine Hat, all the cities, our plan as presented, as developed, is much more comprehensive than any other city's plan. So I hope that when province reviews that plan, they will keep that in mind as well.
Okay, sorry, so you don't think that, so your votes didn't change at all? You didn't change your mind or your approach based on the pressure?
Well, obviously, my thinking evolved absolutely over the last couple of weeks around can we just continue to back and forth with on the photo radar revenue? I know that it is not a predictable funding source for police, and I think police do need predictability in their base funding. Now we have given them that predictability over the next 4 years, and we'll discuss that more over the when we talk about our next 4-year budget.
I think this is for the mayor as well, Natasha Reid with the CBC. Just continuing on the police issue, your first request to the province is related to policing. I believe you mentioned that the cost has doubled. Could you clarify what you mean by that? The salaries have doubled, or and how does that compare to other city employees?
Yeah, so in 2008, province of Alberta made a commitment to fund 105 police officers in Edmonton, but they capped the per police officer cost at $100,000. But today, the same police officer is costing almost $190,000. So we have to fill that gap of $90,000 because province has not paid the true cost of funding those positions.
Okay,
so that's where the gap is.
So why would a salary for a police officer have gone up that much besides inflation?
It has nothing to do with salaries. It has to do with the cap that province put in, and salaries are negotiated separately.
Okay, so your request to the province, is it safe to say then that the city is asking the province to pay for more policing?
What we are asking province to do is pay the true cost of the 105 officers they funded in 2008, because those 105 police officers are costing double today than they costed in 2008.
Okay, why is it double from 2008?
Because, inflation goes up, wages go up, related police equipment goes up, because police officer, when you look at the holistic cost of a police officer, it's not just salaries, it's the equipment, it's the and many other related costs that continue to rise because of inflation.
Okay. May I ask a question for Andre? It has to do with the encampment strategy, and part of the safety plan is an increased response to the encampments. Yet we are short on shelter spaces, day shelters, since the emergency COVID ones were closed, so we're short shelter spaces. So my question is, we're increasing this response to encampments, and then where are the people going?
Yeah, well, we're still making lots of connections to shelters and to housing as well. So that increased response is really about making more connections, having more positive interactions with folks that are in encampments and working with them to get the supports they need. And it's not just about shelters. Some need medical support, some need housing and other things. So the more we respond to encampments, the more people and engagements and connections we can make with social agencies in the encampments, the more we're going to support everybody. It's not about moving all those people directly into a shelter necessarily. The other thing is it's about the neighborhoods that these encampments have an impact on, and wanting to make sure we're cleaning up those areas so that they're safe for Edmontonians to use, and especially in those park and wooded areas.
I know it's not just shelters. I mean, there's transitional housing, there's bridge housing and whatnot, but I mean, there are a large number of camps in Chinatown, and some people wonder, where are they going to go if the city enforces the encampment strategy? So could you give me a couple of examples of somebody who's chronically homeless in a camp? Where do they start?
Yeah. Well, again, it's about the kind of connections they need and the supports they need. Sometimes it doesn't happen immediately. Sometimes it takes a couple of times, but we continue to make those connections. But we also need more shelters and more shelter space and more wraparound services for affordable housing and supported housing, so that people that are in an encampment today can get support. The other issue we're having is that there are some people who are in encampments that don't want to go to the shelter, and this really speaks to the need for that minimum shelter standard. And in addition to advocating it from a city perspective, we're having positive dialogues about the importance of that, because if there's a barrier that prevents you from going to a shelter, for example, you can't go there with your partner, or you don't have a place to put your possessions and property, then it's very difficult for you to want to go to that shelter. With a minimum shelter standard, a lot of those barriers decline, and I think we will have more people wanting to accept that opportunity.
Okay, and just a follow-up for the mayor as well. I believe your second request to the province involved funding for shelter space. Was that separate from the Homeward Trust request, and how much would you be asking for? Can you give us a concrete number?
Yeah, so let me actually find that. So this is one of the 5 requests that we have put together for the province, which is that currently we have 634 permanently funded emergency shelter spaces in Edmonton. When I compare that number to Calgary, Calgary has 1,758 spaces. So there's a huge gap in and these are all provincially funded spaces. So there's a huge gap in what we are getting, what Calgary is getting. So our request is that give us more money to have the same level of shelter space available, that we can actually spread that out throughout the city and make sure that we are reducing the concentration of shelter spaces in the downtown and Chinatown, right? So that's a separate request from $8.9 million that we need to run the supportive housing units that we will have in operations in a couple of months.
Okay. And when do you expect a reply from the province on these 5 requests?
We will be, meeting with province very shortly. We will be requesting that meeting, and then we'll walk through these discrepancies and ask for questions that why it is not just for the shelter space, but when you look at the supportive permanent supports that are required for ending houselessness in Alberta, Calgary gets almost double the amount than what we get, right? I'm sorry, we get 50% less than what Calgary gets, right? So there's another discrepancy that exists. So my appeal to the province is this, that if you're really truly serious about safety and well-being of Edmontonians, then give us the same support that you give to Calgary, right? We're not asking for more. All we say, give us the same support, and that will go a long way to not only help people heal, get better, reduce their pain, but also improve a lot of safety and well-being in our city.
Hi, Mayor. A couple of weeks ago when the Minister Shandro first weighed in on this, you were not entirely appreciative of his approach, nor was I, or many others. I guess 2 weeks on, after having put this together, after having met with the ministers and folks from the community, what your feelings are about the minister's approach to this, invoking the Police Act, and is there any part of this that you found valuable?
I would say that I was surprised and still surprised why we got the letter, and nobody knew about this letter. Even officials within the province did not know about this letter. But that was then, this is now. And I am always looking for opportunities to work with whoever wants to work with us to make life better for Edmontonians. We work on behalf of Edmontonians. That's our job, to advocate on their behalf. I am optimistic that the minister, and we have requested that our plan be reviewed by independent, impartial panel of experts, public safety experts, that they will do that review in an impartial way. That's why we inquired into other cities, what plans they have in place. None of the communities have as comprehensive a plan in place as we do, right? So we will look forward to, from the province, to have a impartial, comprehensive review done and give us some feedback, and we are looking forward to working with them.
My follow-up would probably be best asked to EPS, but since they're not here, maybe Andre can take a stab at it. And it is just in regard to the plans the moves to increase a police presence in Chinatown and downtown, more on transit, peace officers and so on. I guess I'm curious what those officers are actually going to do. Is it just the presence on the street and in the transit system? Is that the idea, to kind of calm things down? Or are there specific actions that we've asked them to take? And how can you, I guess, reassure people that we don't swing the pendulum back the other way too far, that we get the vulnerable people upset about the way they're being treated?
Yeah. What I would say is that, and I'll use the transit example, as we had an increased presence in the transit system, we were finding less incidents happening. That presence alone provides an element of safety to riders in the transit, and people don't do bad things when there is a presence in the system. Some of that is helped with security officers we have, some of it is with transit police, and some of it is with EPS, because there are different levels of authority. But I would say throughout, the main aim is not enforcement. The main aim is making a connection, allowing people who are vulnerable to assist with their connection to the supports that they need, but also dealing with some criminal element that is operating in these areas and quite often preying on vulnerable people. And so that is the focus. Focus of enforcement is on criminal element. Focus of the presence is making a positive, empathetic connection, and we continue to talk about how we do that. And I won't speak for the EPS and how they do that, but I know that there's good techniques and empathetic practices being used to help vulnerable people.
And how do you plan to determine the best areas for these services and that they'll be accessible?
Yeah, thanks. I think key is making sure we do it at the right pace. So this is not going to be immediate change. I think it's fair that some of these conversations can be difficult sometimes in neighborhoods, but we have also been very successful, and neighborhoods have been very welcoming of these facilities. And I think key to that success is making sure they're operated in a way that includes good neighborhood agreements and agreements that work really well. So we've had lots of success with this throughout the city already, and I would say, for example, Boyle Street has many facilities throughout the city and throughout the province, not just one downtown as an example. So I think we have to be very careful with this, but recently Council did approve the funding as part of the Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan of a center, healing center that is out on 100th Avenue and 160th Street. That is welcomed by the community. It's got a great positive approach, and that's going to help with preventing the discharge of people from hospital into houselessness, because they will be discharged from hospital into that healing facility. And that's just one example of how we can decentralize in a way that communities can help. And we also know that, and we've got great partners in Edmonton community leagues as well throughout the city, and they are not opposed to having these kind of conversations.
Hey, one more question from me. Yesterday, when we were talking about the different changes to the transit passenger bylaw, you mentioned to council that bylaw officers are going to focus on not just on ticketing, like maybe you'll use the bylaw to like move them out, but I didn't see any language in the bylaw about that. So is there like maybe a policy that you have on how transit officers are supposed to work with vulnerable people? Like, can you explain how you can assure council that that is not going to happen?
Yeah, so first and foremost, it's about making an empathetic, positive connection, and transit police officers do that, or peace officers, correction, they do that now. And so it's not about ticketing, it's not a focus on enforcement, it's a focus on having a safe place and safe activities happening. So as with any enforcement, it starts with an empathetic approach, but there's the ability to ask people to move out of the space if they're not riding transit. We don't want to issue a bunch of tickets. We don't want to arrest a bunch of people. What we want to do is make sure that people who are using the transit system safely are using it for transit. And if you're not using it for transit, we would rather you go hang out somewhere else. And the officers can do this in a very empathetic way.
How is that different from the former approach with the one that was actually called a loitering bylaw, where
I understand that the city's data showed that 75% of the tickets that were given out between 2016 and October 2020 went to people who were of no fixed address.
I
And
would say-
also 7 times as many Indigenous people were ticketed. So how do you know that's not going to happen again?
I would say that the difference in the previous approach is that there was very much a focus on ticketing as opposed to not a focus on that. We've been asked clearly by council to measure this and report back to council on that very thing to make sure that's not happening. And so we'll take that very seriously as we move ahead for sure. And we'll be reporting to council very soon on that. I think the other thing to add is there was clarity from council and throughout the discussion yesterday that we need to continue to look at these things and this entire bylaw. And a lot of that work is being done with the motion from Councillor Rutherford that's coming this summer. But we also got good clarity from council that we need to do even more work beyond that to make sure all of those things are considered. This bylaw amendment was put forward as a very specific additional tool that could be helpful in the transit system.